They can ban you for, in their eyes, what they think is a justifiable offense to one of the most qualified people in the world to talk about vaccines.
If it's not okay for me to be part of the conversation, even though I'm pointing out scientific facts that may be inconvenient, then who can be allowed?
Yo, what's up, guys? It's your boy Benny. We know that Twitter was essentially an op being used to create false consensus and to mind control you in order to make sure that there is a mechanism for the deep state to control narratives and to punish people that step outside the lines. But we didn't know it went this deep. The latest round of Twitter files just dropped. Alex Berenson reporting now on the Fauci files and the COVID-19 files. Ladies and gentlemen, this stuff is bombshell, and it is proving that there was absolutely zero dissent allowed during COVID-19. There was a specific agenda that was driven down by a series of very powerful people at the top coordinating with the White House in order to silence regular Americans. It's utterly illegal, and it is being exposed right now. Here's the Attorney General of Louisiana saying, when I took office, I swore to protect the Constitution. He's currently suing the Biden administration. We now have hard evidence that President Biden's administration colluded with social media companies to censor viewpoints and silence misinformation that was later deemed true. Here's White House employees asking Twitter to silence Robert Kennedy Jr., Democrat White House, Joe Biden, big hero of his is John Kennedy, asking to silence Robert Kennedy Jr., known critic of the White House COVID-19 narrative. Hey, wanted to flag this tweet. I want it removed ASAP. This is the White House saying they want to silence a family member of the Kennedys. Unbelievable. And they go through a bunch of other examples of the White House doing this. Robert Kennedy responded to these revelations, along with a bunch of other revelations of silencing from the White House, the destruction of the First Amendment from inside the White House. The calls are coming from inside the House, saying, compare Joe Biden's approach with my uncle John Kennedy, president as well. Strategy on censorship. No official of my administration, high or low, civilian or military, will interpret my words as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissents, or to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold press and public facts that they deserve to know. JFK, Robert Kennedy's uncle. So the White House now working to censor members of the Kennedy family. Wild stuff. Of course, the most famous censorship story over the past year was Dr. Robert Malone, one of the most prominent doctors in vaccine technology, holds 6 patents for mRNA vaccine technology, arguably the world's expert in mRNA vaccines. He has been reinstated on Twitter after being banned. He was banned on Twitter after stepping out of line with the message, the preferred narrative by our ruling elite. He went on Joe Rogan's podcast and had this to say about his banning.
They never tell you.
They never told you.
Well, they never tell anybody.
They removed you for not going along with whatever the tech narrative is, because tech clearly has a censorship agenda when it comes to COVID, in terms of treatment, in terms of whether or not you are promoting what they would call vaccine hesitancy. They can ban you for that. They can ban you for, in their eyes, what they think is a justifiable offense. And they're doing this, and I don't know who these people are that are doing this, but they're doing this. One of the most important things about you reading out your history like that is to one of the most qualified people in the world to talk about vaccines.
Well, thank you for that. I think that's so. One way that some people put it is, and of course, since this has happened, I've been contacted by multiple lawyers that are looking at filing a suit, just like Alex Berenson has one against Twitter. And the point is made just what you just made. So the point that I think is kind of succinct on this is, if my voice, if there's no merit to my voice being in the conversation, whether it's true or not, whether I'm factually correct or not, let's park that just for a minute. Whether or not I'm right in everything I say, and I freely admit No one's perfect. I'm not perfect. That's one of my core points, is people should think for themselves. And I try really hard to give people the information and help them to think, not to tell them what to think. Okay? But the point is, if it's not okay for me to be part of the conversation, even though I'm pointing out scientific facts that may be inconvenient, then who can be allowed?
Yeah, thank God that Robert Malone is back into the conversation. This is Robert Malone's Twitter account now. He has almost 1 million followers. Good for him. He's the inventor of the mRNA vaccines. Okay, well, if this guy can't talk, who can talk? That was what he said on Joe Rogan's podcast. Robert Malone has been on a terror since being welcomed back to Twitter. We learn more and more about the censorship of the free speech by the Biden administration daily now. The victim was informed consent, among with so many others. White House COVID censorship machine. This regime, this Biden regime, is without question the most unconstitutional regime ever to exist in America. The militarized response to the pandemic was a violation of fundamental rights under the Constitution and Bill of Rights. This is what Malone is tweeting now. No wonder they had to silence this guy. It led to countless deaths and hardships. There must be consequences and change to our government. This cannot happen again. Somebody who also believes that this cannot happen again is Joe Rogan. I was and am right. As Joe Rogan said on January 5th of this year, what I said was true. Still waiting for an apology from Neil Young, Joni Mitchell, whoever the hell those two are, as well as so many other musicians. I'm not holding my breath here. Now, what is Robert Malone talking about? Rob Malone is talking about the canceling of Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan, 270 health experts to Spotify. Joe Rogan's misinformation, sociological issue, devastating proportions. Oh, free thinker bad, Joe Rogan bad. Look at all these. Joe Rogan dangerous. You just Google search Joe Rogan dangerous. And look at this. From The Independent, Joe Rogan's dangerous. From Yahoo, Joe Rogan's extraordinarily dangerous. From Mike, Joe Rogan's an idiot. He's so dangerous. From Vox, how do you solve a problem like Joe Rogan? From Newsweek, Joe Rogan's dangerous. CNN, Joe Rogan's dangerous, 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 dangerous. They tried to come at Joe Rogan just for talking about this issue, just for platforming people with different opinions. Somebody with a lot of different opinions is Dave Portnoy. He was on Joe Rogan's podcast this week, and he asked him about getting canceled. Spotify didn't end up canceling Joe Rogan's show. They tried so hard to cancel Joe Rogan because he brought on Robert Malone. That's what did it. Nothing else. That's what did it. The floodgates of hell opened in order to cancel the most popular voice of reason in our time, the most listened to man in the world, Joe Rogan. Come at me. Nobody has more downloads than Joe Rogan. Nobody has a more powerful voice than Joe Rogan when it comes to media. And so they came to cancel him because he was a threat to them. Dave Portnoy asked him about this episode. Spotify ended up not canceling Joe Rogan, but ended up apologizing for Joe Rogan. It's pretty embarrassing episode. Here's what Joe had to say about it.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
When you did Spotify, did you care when all that was going on with Spotify, with like the people revolting against you at Spotify? Or did you just not give a shit at all?
Well, the people at Spotify weren't. There was just a couple of people that were like tech people that were upset. But
so then how did that become such a big story?
The real story was the medical misinformation story. That's where things got weird. And there was a lot of people that were behind that. That you know, Democratic super PACs, and there was a lot of shit. It was like very organized. But that was because of having people like Robert Malone and Peter McCullough that were telling a narrative that was contrary to what was going on in the public about vaccines and about the efficacy and about the dangers and about COVID and the actual dangers of COVID, and also alternative treatments, whether or not they were effective, whether or not the information's being suppressed. That stuff got creepy. But
did you care? Is it more like, because you, from outside looking in, you had built this thing up all yourself, took a paycheck, but signed it over to Spotify. To me, that would be, I was curious what your thought process, were at any point you're like, I wish I just kept this myself. I don't need this headache. Or did?
No, because I would have done the same thing and I would have been banned from YouTube. I would have been in trouble in other ways. It was a matter of like a time where talking about certain things was very taboo. and I talk about everything. And when I had access to someone like Robert Malone, who owns 9 patents on the creation of mRNA vaccine technology, my perspective was like, look, if it's true, it's true. And the chips will fall where they may. And if the only way people are getting this information is through me, that's f***ing crazy. But that's also the cross I have to bear. This is what it is. I'm talking to this guy. I'm fascinated by it personally. I want to know. I mean, and he was wildly disparaged. So was Dr. Peter McCullough, wildly disparaged. But turns out he was accurate. And as more and more information gets out over time, it will show what happened, how they were suppressed, how there was active campaigns to silence them, and how those campaigns were funded. And that's what we're finding out right now. So it was an uncomfortable time for sure, especially when people like, Neil Young. Oh, I loved Neil Young. But Neil Young, I don't know if this is true or not, but somebody told me that after I released my video explaining how a lot of the stuff that they called misinformation in the past that would get kicked you off is now mainstream news, like the lab leak hypothesis. If you talked about the lab leak hypothesis on YouTube at the beginning of the pandemic, you would have been fucking canceled. They would have pulled you off of YouTube. They would have suppressed your episodes. They would have canceled. Now that's on the cover of fucking Newsweek. Right? And now most scientists and epidemiologists and virologists are pointing towards that as the likely scenario, that is a lab leak. I had Brett Weinstein, who is a evolutionary biologist, on yesterday, and he explained why that lab leak hypothesis is most likely correct in scientific terms that are like mind-boggling. So was it good? No, but it is what it is, and my perspective is, look, it could be. I'm in a very unusual and fortunate situation, and sometimes you find yourself in a place in life where you have to figure out what you're going to do. Are you going to not talk to these people because of pressure when you think these people are telling the truth, or are you going to let the chips fall where they may?
So that was over because from, again, totally outsider, it seemed like a big deal. Like it seemed like a big thing within Spotify. It seemed, you're saying it wasn't as big though, it was just small. Like you weren't getting that. For me, is the big, almost all the stuff you said, whether it was true or not true, I think you believed it was true. That's all that kind of matters. It turns out a lot of it was, but it's there's similarities. You did it so long yourself, and then Spotify's under a ton of pressure. Like, didn't they delete some of your episodes?
Yeah, well, they did that, and they also were very apprehensive about certain guests that I had on, and there was, a lot of pressure from advertisers. There was a lot of pressure from different people. They were, like different artists like Neil Young and Joni Mitchell pulled their stuff, and it was touch and go. But again, over time, it showed that was all true, and then all that went away.
Yeah,
and so it was the right. Now, if I was wrong. Now imagine if I was wrong, and imagine, well, not even me. I shouldn't say I was wrong because I wasn't really the one who was saying these things. These things were mostly being said by experts. But if those experts turned out to be horse, that would be devastating. Like if it did cause the death of millions of people because these guys were lying and these people didn't take something that could have saved them, and but it turns out that's not really the case. And it turns out there was alternate therapies and alternate different medications that were suppressed. Not only that, the information about simple things like vitamin D and exercise and the benefits of those things and how that was suppressed, about how obesity contributes to COVID, that was all suppressed. None of that stuff was being discussed. And
I'm wearing this now.
So it's just one of those things where you find out that the more things change, the more they remain the same. Pharmaceutical companies from the beginning of their industry have been full of shit. They make great stuff. They make Adderall, you love it. They make Viagra. They make cancer medications that work. They make all these different things that are wonderful for people. All these different things that save people. But really what they're in the business of is making money. That's what they're in the business of.
100%.
And when something comes along that steps on their money, they don't like it.
Yeah. Like I said, for me, it was almost the bigger issue of how I was curious how you were dealing with it.
Yeah, well, it sounds like he's dealing with it fine, but it sounds like it also hurt Joe Rogan's feelings because you're not allowed to ask questions. You're not allowed to ask questions about what happened during COVID-19 and the decisions that were made at the top by the people who may or may not have stood to benefit from some of these bad decisions, namely Dr. Fauci. And we are anxiously awaiting the Twitter files drop on Dr. Fauci. Dr. Fauci, of course, whenever he is asked by Rand Paul, in this specific instance, about the origins of COVID-19 and the funding of gain-of-function research inside of Chinese laboratories, which is illegal research that happens here and happening now in our country. Dr. Fauci funding gain-of-function research in Wuhan. The biggest story ever, maybe. Well, he shakes in fear. He literally shakes. Why?
I want everyone to understand that if you look at those viruses, and that's judged by qualified virologists and evolutionary biologists, those viruses are molecularly impossible
no one's
to
saying
result
they are. No
in
one's saying those viruses
SARS-CoV-2.
caused the pandemic.
Senator Paul,
we're saying they are gain-of-function viruses because they were animal viruses that became more transmissible in human, and you funded it.
And you
admit the truth.
And you implying...
Senator Paul, your time has expired, and I will allow witnesses...
Still shaking, still shaking. That's what they're scared of, ladies and gentlemen. They're scared of the truth. They're scared of the truth. And this is truly a living hell, to be living in fear of the truth. And it's its own hell for these people. And ladies and gentlemen, they may be heading there. That ain't up to me. But I'll tell you this. If you want to get a little bit of salvation, go on over, follow Robert Malone's page. Be baptized in the truth and have no fear. We are hunting for the actual truth here, and the truth will set you free. There is no reconciliation without truth. That's why it's called Truth and Reconciliation. And there is so much damage that has been done during COVID-19. We need it to start understanding that us as a society, we need changes. The White House is actively trying to silence Robert Kennedy Jr. Yeah, well, if you know anything about the deep state, they certainly took steps to silence John Kennedy, if you know what I mean. Wink, wink, nod, nod. So maybe it's totally on brand for them. Nonetheless, ladies and gentlemen, this is a seminal moment. Robert Malone back on Twitter. Joe Rogan not giving two Fs about trying to get canceled on Spotify and saying we're going to expose who is actually funding all of this. And you know exactly who it is. It is the corporate leftist WEF-funded Borg hive mind herd animals who allow zero dissent as they get rich and as they shred our Constitution while doing it. Those are the people that we fight against every single day here at The Benny Show. Thank you so much for watching this long. Please subscribe and like this video if you liked it. If you didn't like this video, well, you're probably Dr. Fauci, but either way, we thank you for watching this long. We are fighting here. We are memeing. Thank you for memeing and fighting along with us. My name is Benny Johnson. See ya. Thank you for watching. Our channel is here to meme the libs until they cry and then to meme them crying. Their tears taste like ice cream. We ridicule the establishment, and we do so because of you. Your support keeps us going. So if you liked what you saw, please click the thumbs up. Please punch, subscribe, and ring the bell to let you know when we have a new video. Don't you want us to let you know when we're live? Please check out more of our videos here and sign up for our mailing list in case something happens and the plug gets pulled. We want to be able to keep in touch with you. My name is Benny Johnson, and thank you for watching. Based Patriots, stay free.